That's what I'm not even sad. Okay, I'm welcoming Jenny Chadima to the podcast, and I'm very excited to have you at U conferences. We go back a long way, and we've crossed paths at least 100 times. Would you say?
Oh yeah, by far, by
At
far.
least
Yep.
100 times. We've met originally. We worked out at the same gym, and I think the first time I remember meeting you was when your husband did a fitness competition. um, I don't know what kind he did, but I was there doing makeup for somebody and you were there supporting your husband. Uh,
Oh,
I think that's the first time I remember like seeing you.
okay, that would have been, I'm thinking, because he only did like probably two or three fitness competitions, but I think that was in like maybe 2016,
Yeah,
maybe in that era.
yeah, it was back then. And then I went to several of yours along the way, supporting other teammates and stuff. But that's how we first got connected. And you weren't doing entrepreneurship back then, at all. You were working for the family business, right?
Yes. And
Yeah,
that's actually where I remember meeting you was when the gym was located in his family business. And
right, right.
you were training in there. Were you training for
Powerlifting. Yeah,
powerlifting?
yeah.
Okay. And I was like, and then I remember seeing you outside, like I think there was a an event, and I was like, dang, that girl cleans up well.
I know a lot of people from the gym said that. In fact, the first time I ever met Sarah Burrows, who was a bikini competitor, she like didn't know I was the same person that she had already met. She just told that story yesterday. She's getting married, of doing her wedding makeup. And it's just like, oh my gosh, so many, like all of those relationships still kind of come back into my life. And then I remember when you decided to so the family business is your husband's family's business. What do they do? Because so they're kind of entrepreneurs in their own right. Can you explain what it is they do?
Yeah. So my husband's grandpa started the business. It's fire protection. So they service like fire extinguishers and the kitchen fire suppression system. So like when a new restaurant is built out, they
Right,
have to have this suppression system that goes over their cooking equipment in case they have a fire.
right.
So my husband's grandpa started it, and then his parents own it, and he's kind of next in line
Yeah.
to take over the throne.
Yeah, yeah. We had talked because my husband's in a family business as well. So I remember we've had conversations about that, and what that looks like. And it is definitely not outside of entrepreneurship, but it's a different it's just a different vein of entrepreneurship all in and of itself. When
Absolutely. And it
so
brings a different dynamic when it's a family business,
yeah,
and I love, I mean, I feel like I scored big time as far as the family that I married into. It does present challenges though when you work with your spouse.
oh, I bet. I can't even imagine. I've never worked with Eric, but my in-laws worked together their entire career. Like I think 30 years they owned the business before Eric and his brother took it over. And yeah, that's I don't nope, that would not be for me. So, what did you do before you worked with them?
So before I worked with my husband, so I worked with him for 4 years, and prior to that, I worked a job in sales for 7 years. My journey is, I mean, it looks like, I mean, it's like it's all over the place, but um, so I was selling steel. I was selling steel for 7 years.
No kidding. How about
Yeah,
that?
when like that's kind of a weird story, but like I was bartending at the time, and I waited on this group of guys, and like they would come in every day for lunch, and eventually they're like, "Hey, we have this position open in our company, we think you'd be really great. You want to come in? It's like salary job benefits, and I like at the time, like I'm saying, I was a bartender, so I'm like, benefits? Salary job? Like what is this, And then when they mentioned you're going to be selling steel, I'm like, my background at the time was actually massage therapy and aesthetics. So I'm like, how in the heck do these two things go together? But I loved that job.
Did
I
you?
Yeah, I had like the coolest boss. All of my coworkers were great. Like I said, the money was fantastic. Like in all, like looking at it on paper, it was the perfect job.
Wow. So then, oh, so how did you get into like okay, so you did that, then you went and worked for your husband's business. How did you get into doing bikini competitions? Because that is like, when you say it, when you say you were a bikini competitor, if nobody knows that industry at all, it sounds like very vain. It sounds like a real wishy-washy, but that's some serious work that has gone into that, some serious dedication. And you were at the top of that game. How did you get involved with that to begin with?
Um, well, and kind of on that note, like when I used to think of that term, I would think of like a wet t-shirt contest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true
What do
too.
you do? I compete in bikini competitions. Oh yeah, good. That's great. Um, so I mean, I started working out in 2006 regularly, like where I was going to the gym a few times a week, but I would only go to group fitness classes. And it kind of progressed from there. And I had this magazine, Oxygen magazine, which is a women's fitness magazine. And in the back, this is prior to Pinterest, YouTube, all the other apps that are out there now, right? Where you
Right.
could find these people online. So in this magazine in the back were these women who were competing in these competitions. And their bodies just looked amazing. And I just remember thinking like, I want to do that. And so in 2012, that was right when Ken had moved into my husband's family business. He started, so the gym that you and I met at, he had just started renting a space there. And Austin was like, hey, there's this guy that, I think he trains people to do what you do. Little did I know that he had never trained a bikini competitor. He'd only straight trained strongmen, power lifters, and I was the first one.
Oh, no kidding. How about that? And now, like, if you know Ken at all, and I'm sure plenty of people listening will, because we just have a lot of crossover. Like, I've seen Ken do bikini competitor posing like a boss, and so I did not know. Yeah, I've watched him coach people on how to do those walks, and I've been like, oh, okay, yep, okay, he's got it. That's figured out. It's very good.
Yes. So good. And like it's funny because so I started training with him in 2012 and it was just something that like I'm pretty competitive by nature anyways and it was kind of like something that had been missing I feel like in my life to give me a goal and a focus. I hadn't had that for so many years and so this really kind of gave me drive, for something to attain. And then it was like once I started winning, it was like, wow, game on. I just
Yeah.
wanted to compete more and it just kind of took off from there.
Well, and all of that to say, and like I kind of set all of that up on purpose because now you own Jetty Chadima Wellness is your business and you're doing wellness coaching for people. But like also there's always a backstory to your backstories, which I'm sure that's true for most people. But it didn't start as you were doing health and like wellness train or coaching. It kind of started you were doing some like fitness coaching, which I'm sure you have aspects of that. You had a yoga studio for a while. You were you kind of like dipped your toe wherever it felt like it fit in order to figure out what you were going to do, didn't you? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so when I left that job in sales, and I'll kind of share this at the conference and talk a little bit about this. But when I left, the plan was for me to take off and go back to school for social work. And that kind of fell through for a few different reasons. And so they had a position open in my husband's family business. And so I'm like, okay, I'll jump on board there and, we'll see how it goes. Well, one thing after another, the biggest thing that I kept saying to people was like, I'm just not fulfilled. Like I would do something and you know how it is when you are really good at a lot of things. Like I'm not saying that to brag myself up, but when
Sure,
you're
no, that's fair.
you master a lot of things, sometimes it's easy for other people to put a label on you of what you should do because you're good at it.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like internally, I would say yes and take on these roles. But then again, there was this dull ache inside that like what I'm doing is not aligned with what I'm called to do, so to speak.
Right.
And so from there, it was really kind of like listening to that inner voice and going, okay, what's next? And I'd kind of go off in one direction and it would be like, yeah, no, that's not really it, you know? And a lot of times I would start things and then, you know, stop. Or, I mean, it got to a point where I really was not afraid to fail, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, just to see how it would work out. Well, and the backstory to the backstory to the backstory to the backstory is you even went through a recovery, a whole recovery journey through from addiction, and you have like a whole like experience level and understanding and such a way about talking about that piece of it. And there, like it's almost impossible to start at the beginning of your story, because if you do, there's almost too many, like it keeps going, and when you kind of look back, it's like, oh, that's why that wasn't going to work out for you. Now where I see you shining now in this like coaching role for people and a wellness, like truly coaching the whole wellness of a person, I'm like, oh wow, that's a total Jenny thing. And do you feel like that's you're closer to having like that package of what you should be doing with your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Although I will say that recently, like my title right now is starting not to fit as much. I feel like I'm kind of pivoting in a new direction. That's scary. But all of that to be said, yes, like I've always been somewhat of a cheerleader, I think, for the majority of my life. You know, I've always been really energetic, very like, you know, I'll be your hype girl, I'll pump you up kind of a thing, you know. And so coaching, I think, really fulfills um, the enjoyment that I get out of seeing somebody else start loving life and feeling healthier, body, mind, and soul, you
Yeah,
know.
because you definitely don't just like, you're not one of those people that says like you just don't coach them on nutrition, or you don't just coach them on like what they should be doing with their physical fitness, but you really dive deep into what's behind all of the whatever it is that they need coaching through. At least that's my experience with learning about you. Like it's really on a much deeper level, and you have a very strong religious spiritual side to you that you are not afraid to talk about. And I always love that about you. I love when people will just own exactly who they are and what their message is, because it really attracts the people that you're trying, the right people to you when you're so deliberate about that.
Yes.
So tell me, like, so where you're at right now, what do you offer to people that are in your space or that come into your space looking for coaching? What are you offering to them?
Yeah. So right now, I would consider myself a health and wellness coach that is Christ focused. So what I where I lead women is into greater health, healing, and wholeness, and a closer relationship with Jesus, because that is so much of my own personal story of finding healing, discovering wholeness through my faith. And I'm not a surface level person. I do like to go deep. And so I'm not a chit chatty kind of girl. Like I'm going to get to the core kind of a thing, you know, because I really feel like that is part of my calling, is helping women to break free from some of those things that they've been held back by, so that they can step into who they're created to be. Because I'm a firm believer that um, you know, when we each are living in alignment with the person that we're created to be, that like shifts the whole vibration of the planet. You know what I mean? So I get super geeked out about it. It gets me really excited talking about it, because I am so passionate about it. When I see women that come to me and they are having panic attacks, they're extremely anxious, they're depressed. I've had women who are suicidal, and I work with them one on one for 3 months. That's kind of the biggest package that I have, is 3 months of one on one coaching. And then to see them, like 3 months is really such a short period of time in our life, you know, but to see them sleeping better, off meds. And this is like, I'm not here to tell you whether or not to take a med or not. Like that's not my role. But just to see these miraculous things that happens, I mean, I've started to keep a journal just on the miracles that I see in my clients, because it's like, it's mind blowing to watch these women, and I'm just coming alongside them. I like to, I mean, yes, I'm a coach. However, I really like to walk shoulder to shoulder with these women. It's not like I'm better than, I have maybe experienced some things a little bit farther down the road, or maybe walked a little bit farther along. But um, in all honesty, I mean, and I'm not the traditional style at all, but I really do bond with these women. And that's another benefit, like, that I hadn't anticipated, but just like establishing a sisterhood with some of these women that, it's just incredible. It really is. Like, I cry a lot over it because I'm like, I just feel so blessed that I get to do what I do.
I muted myself. I'm sorry. I was going to say that's a real natural thing for you. Just knowing you for as long as I have, like you bond well with people, and you are always like looking for what else is going on. I've never known you to be a surface level, hi, how are you? Like if you ask how somebody is, like you are really interested in knowing how they are, and you'll sit and chat with people about how they're doing. And people always feel very cared for by you. At least that's been, I think, everybody that I know's experience of you. So it's always very easy to understand that when you're offering something, that you're going to give it your absolute 100% all in, um, just everything that you have. And so I think that's really, because you don't just offer one-on-one coaching. You have like all kinds of things that you've been up to, from what I understand anyway, with groups and retreats and stuff like that too. Are you doing any more of that kind of thing?
Yes. So there has been kind of like different spin-offs that have come from what started as just one-on-one coaching. So
Right.
I do offer weekend retreats, that, with the coaching that I offer, as we kind of talked about, it's a mind, body, soul. So these women, they get a new workout program every month. I do help them with nourishing their body with food, and then I also guide them in their walk with God. And so during these weekend retreats, it's kind of like a mini breakdown of what I would do with my clients for 3 months. I do have a couple of those coming up, June 25th through the 27th. And then the final one of 2020 will be October 1st through the 3rd. I also have a 4-week healing course that I'm really excited. I've never offered this yet, but it starts on April 8th. And that's going to be 4 weeks on Zoom. And again, it's the premise of that one is specifically healing, and has to do a lot with damaged emotions and memories, and how, we can really be kind of run, our emotions can kind of control us, and we're not really meant to live in that way. And so I've got that kind of on the table. I offer free resources for women, that, a weekly blog, the Radiantly Healthy podcast, and then I've started offering a weekly devotional that just lands directly into your email. So those are kind of some free resources that are available for women as well.
Well, and yeah, people can kind of understand who you are. You wear your heart on your sleeve for sure. It doesn't take very long to understand the kind of person you are when you get to talking to people. So I think that like, yeah, like your podcast and stuff really gives people an idea of exactly who you are, and what you're so transparent about what you are, what you believe, what you're offering, that very quickly you can understand, if that's something that's for you or not, or if that's something you want to explore more. So I think that's really cool. And, I've had friends that have done this coaching with you, and they have just gushed about how good it was for them and for their soul, for their spirit, and just, how much that they looked forward to that retreat and all that stuff. And those are pretty small groups, right?
Yes. So kind of the magic number right now is 3, which is really small. And when you have your own business, so kind of the temptation, I think sometimes it can be a numbers game. There's a lot of talk out there depending upon who you follow, and it's like more. And what I've found is really less is more, because of the type of work that I do, because the things that come up on retreat, it's not something that you can have 10 women there. It's something that needs to be small and intimate so that women feel comfortable opening up and sharing some of these things that maybe they've been too embarrassed to talk about, or that they feel super weighed down by. And you get into a larger room of people, and then people want to clam up,
Yeah,
and
somebody gets lost in the back, and somebody um, gets lost in the front too. I mean, even even if there's a few people that are very forthcoming in a larger group, and I mean, a few days seems like a long time, but there are not enough hours in the day to get it all done when you're working on stuff like that. It's really hard, I think. So
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's exciting. And I think a lot of people are looking for those opportunities, and where does that exist, and is this the right one for me? And I think if we're not talking about what's available, there are other small women's retreats and things. And I wish and I hope that you conferences can help women know what's out there, or know what's coming, and have the opportunity to explore which ones may be good for them, because there is nothing better than like a couple of days away to just, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's helpful if you could actually work on something and not just sit there and stare at television or something, but to, just dive into all you, because we spend, naturally spend our time worried about everybody else and everything else. I mean,
Yes.
not
So
even like,
much pouring out, I feel like, and we're not pouring in enough.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And you had come to the conference, I think the last time it was in person. And I remember we talked about speaking, and you said what I told you I was going to speak about then is nothing like I decided to speak about. Tell me what the difference was, like what, and how, because that was really, you were like, oh my gosh, what I thought I was going to do is nothing like what I ended up applying for.
Oh my goodness, not at all, Kendra. And I was just trying to figure out how I was going to even talk about this, which I'm not going to touch on it really at U conference. But so I went to the one that was September, October 2019. Was that
The last one we had in person. Yeah.
Courageously You or Confidently You?
Great.
Courageously You?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was on the verge of hiring another business coach. So I had already hired two coaches to start my business, to create this thing that literally came out of nothing, right? And these women helped me to create my business online. Well, again, depending upon who you're listening to, who you're following, it can really be this thing where you get sucked into just continuing to hire more people. And for me, that's kind of where I fell into. And as somebody who is a coach, I would say there are times when you do not need a coach. And I was in debt, 5 figures, and I was looking at hiring the coach who was 4 figures per month, like a big 4 figures per month.
Wow.
And so what I was going to talk about, this is what I reached out to you about, was that I was going to show women how they could get out of debt and be making 5 figures a month. That was what my talk was going to be about, right? Except literally after I left the conference, starting in October, I entered into one of the hardest seasons of my life. It was the most challenging months of my almost 12-year marriage. Definitely the hardest months of my husband's life, and for sure the hardest months of my life since I lost my father over 20 years ago.
Wow.
Our 2020 started in 2019. And it did.
Like
And
2020
so,
had nothing on the end of
well, it
2019.
didn't. It really didn't. It was like once the pandemic hit, I'm not going to lie, it honestly wasn't really a big deal to me. And I don't say that to hurt anyone else's feelings, but we were already living in what felt like a hole, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that shutdown happened and when things started happening, it was like life already felt super heavy. So it was kind of like, what's one other thing,
Yeah. Or almost a relief that, well, at least I don't have to worry about going to work now.
Right.
As terrible as it sounds. Yeah, that is crazy. I guess I didn't remember I just remember you were so pumped up about what you were going to talk about. And I just always, so yeah, it is funny. And you're like, no, that's not what I'm going to talk about at all.
No.
you
And
know,
girl, that's because your conferences are so impactful and motivating. I did. I left that sucker on fire.
and then you just started your own life on fire. Well, good job, Mom.
It just went down.
Well, and the thing that reminds me when you say that is, you know, as somebody that comes, you mentioned earlier, somebody that's really good at a lot of things, or things come easy, or it, and it sounds super egotistical when you say it out loud, but it's not. That's not what it is. It's like it appears that things come easy to some people, and it appears that I know my stepmom will say, well, everything you touch turns to gold. And I'm like, well, that's because I like work really hard at mining that gold.
Did you
Um,
say rose gold?
yeah. No, she didn't, but she should have, because that's the truth. But the thing about people that are seemingly confident from the outside looking in, and that I won't say seem to have it all together, but seemingly like are figuring things out. There are rocky roads and hard times, and it is you never know what somebody's going through and what somebody could use. And I always remind myself that when I'm going through a hard time, and I've been through a real hard season recently myself, that you will get to the other side and you will learn from this. But it is so hard when you're in it. I mean, it is the depths of, it's not fun. And then when you're an entrepreneur, you still, I mean, you just still have to show up. It doesn't matter how much anxiety, depression, if it's the worst time in your marriage or your business, or if you've got all the debt, or what, it doesn't matter. Like, you still have to show up, and that can be really, really tough. Do you find that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs now, and is that into, or is it kind of both?
Both, but I would say the kind of the common denominator that I see a lot of times is that I do work with women who are very driven. They're
Mm,
very driven and they do have their hands, they're very busy, they are doing a lot of things. And so that's where, when it comes to taking care of themselves, they either feel guilty, they don't have time for it, and then they feel very exhausted, overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, all those things, right? Because they are really busy caring for other people, working a successful job, whatever that might be. That's
right.
typically, I would say, a lot of the women that I
So
do.
do you find that they're all pretty surprised when they find out? Because I'm sure you have to do some relating when you're talking, that you've been through some hard things too. Do people just need to hear sometimes that you get it, like when they're going through a tough time, or when they're really having a hard walk? Do they just need to
I
hear that?
think a lot of the clients that I take on have been following me on social media. And because I am really open about sharing lots of things, I think that's kind of what sometimes draws them in, is like, okay, like she's going to understand. I feel okay sharing these things on this application that maybe I have never said out loud,
Mhm.
and that is another kind of aspect to it, is that, with my clients, I talk with them daily. And so I really get to know them on an intimate, personal level. And so we do share a lot of things. And I absolutely, that's one of the things that, I wouldn't have thought when I was going through like my addiction, for example, that it would turn out being a tool that I use to help women today. At the
Yeah.
time when you're in it, like you're saying, it's really hard and it's overwhelming, and you're like, you can't always see what's, outside of right in front of your
Right.
face, um but yeah, it is something that I definitely share with the women I work with. And it's pretty awesome how that works out.
So you do like a lot of faith-based, like faith has a lot is the foundation for which you kind of build upon,
Yeah.
with your coaching and with the things that you do. But and you use your experience from addiction to kind of help guide you through different things. But you don't only work with people that are suffering with addiction issues, correct?
No, absolutely not. I would say the majority, like, of women do not have an addiction. Like, I've worked with a few clients that do have come to me because they feel like maybe they're drinking a little bit too much. Food is another one that's a little bit more common that I see than alcohol. Women who are like, I feel like I always turn to food when I'm feeling some sort of way. But overall, I would say like
Shopping.
kind of the general woman that I work with is just like feeling like there's something more to life. Not really necessarily feeling super happy, not really feeling very healthy, wanting to grow closer to God. Um, that's probably kind of a general
Yeah,
over.
so just yeah, that makes sense. And you're very open about your stuff with addiction. I mean, it's almost like you, I mean, sometimes when you share things, I'm like, dang, like she really went through that. Because to have only known you sober is, I mean, it's, and I've compared you many times to my friend Ray, who's very similar. We've talked many times about that, but like, I cannot imagine her either. She tells me some of her wild stories, and I'm like, are you sure you're not just telling me about some Girls Gone Wild episode you saw?
Uh,
Because I can't, I just can't imagine you doing that or being that way. And I had my wild streak, but certainly nothing along those lines. And but you're very open about it. And sometimes I love how rawly you'll tell a story about a memory that you've had from your from those times, because it really jars people, the reader, myself, and I'm sure others. It jars you out of whatever pre thoughts that you have, like whoever you think Jenny Chadima is today, is it kind of jars you out of like, oh no, this is a human being, a very flawed human being that had very you know hard things to go through. Like, this chick knows what she's talking about, and you really do jar people into knowing that you are not just somebody that's just talking a talk, that you've been places, all of them.
it's funny you say that, Kendra, because like I was thinking about this the other day that, I never imagined that I would share so publicly things that I was too embarrassed to even talk about privately,
Well,
because
yeah. I mean, you couldn't have like, I mean, you probably didn't wake up sober one day and be like, well, I'm just going to start talking about this stuff.
no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
Have you
I mean,
ever had anybody from your family, your life, say, Jenny, maybe we keep that in the closet. Maybe we just don't talk about that anymore. Or people like,
no.
are they awesome? That's cool.
No, I've always I that's actually a really good point, Kendra, because no, I've never been met with that. I've always had a lot of encouragement behind me, and I think that that probably is something that has been very beneficial along my journey is that, you know, real quick, when I decided that I was done, you know, that was it for me. Like I needed to go and seek help for my addiction. Like most of the people that were around me didn't even know that I had a problem
Really?
because of the way that I drank. And so for me, like I could go months at a time without a single drop of alcohol, but once I took like a sip, like it was on, and then I was on a full on bender filled with alcohol and cocaine for the whole weekend. And so unless you were like right there in my inner circle doing the same things that I was doing, chances are you didn't really know, because I'd never gotten an OWI, I never went to jail, I'd never gotten any trouble, I never lost a job, like all those things that I think sometimes we try and check off to see, okay, do I have a problem? Nope, that hasn't happened. Nope, and I couldn't check any of those boxes. And so I think in some regards that almost kind of worked against me, because I was trying to say, okay, well, no, why is it so bad if I go out on a Friday at 5 o'clock? Everybody does that. Well, not
Yeah.
everybody stays up all weekend long snorting dope either, you
You
know?
know, I actually have a friend that just went through some some sobriety from alcohol, and the first counselor that she saw said, well, I don't know that I could call you an alcoholic, because you basically, because she didn't get up and drink before she went to work. And I was just like, but if somebody's telling you they have a problem, how
Right.
about we just believe that they're suffering somewhere, that they feel like they have that problem? But literally, yeah, that a substance abuse, like that's their job. So, well, I don't really feel like you fit the criteria, because you're, basically you can survive the day without a drink. And I thought, oh, but I knew of her because I was in her inner circle, So
Yeah.
I knew how it was when she did drink and when she did get like out of control, and it was a problem, and her personality changed, and she'd get it together by Monday morning, but Friday at 5 through Monday at 8 was a complete dumpster fire, and no way could be sustained and lived that way. So glad you mentioned that, because I think we do have like, well, this is what.
Just the stigma, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not missing teeth and missing work and in jail, then by God, you're fine. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Which is kind of heartbreaking, that someone would go to seek help and then it's like, no, you're really not that bad.
Could be
I mean,
worse.
it was like what really did me in is like I had tried to quit drinking on my own for 5 years, but what would happen is there would come that event, or that wedding or whatever it was, and I would set out and be like, no, I'm not even going to drink, and I would seriously mean it. But like the feeling of getting there, and sometimes like that insecurity of okay, I'm the only one here that's not drinking, or just even I think looking at it now as maybe somewhat of a social anxiety that I didn't recognize then. And that couple drinks, right, takes that edge off. Well,
Right.
then you take that edge off and then it's like, well, game on, and so, but I think that for me, it was more of I was just so tired of the emotional roller coaster. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was just exhausted.
Yeah, that's well, and we have several speakers that are sober from a variety of different for a variety of different reasons. And I have and I am not a sober person. I am now, currently, today, yesterday, most days am. But and I don't think there's anything wrong with drinking, but I live with somebody that's sober, and so I really have a very keen understanding of the balance that's healthy in a relationship, or in a relationship with alcohol. But it's not just alcohol or drugs. Like you said, it's food, it's shopping, it could be exercise, it can be all kinds of things like that our brain associates dopamine with, and that we then become addicted to. It's just unfortunately, there's some substances that are more harmful than others, and things that harm our health. That's what it is. And I think it's worth talking about. I think it's so worth being open about. um, I think we definitely live in a place, in a world now, where we can be. The stigmas still exist, and I think the only way we get through it is when people are brave enough to talk about it, and to explain how it is. And you know um, Angie, that was on the pod, or that's speaking, and we were talking about how cool it is that we have 3 women that are speaking that are sober, and like how do we like talk about that? And I said, well, my challenge in talking about it is I don't necessarily want to be associated with an only sober conversation. This is like, I don't want people to say, oh, the U conferences are only for sober people. Like,
Right.
I want people to be inspired by all people. But I said, how do I get past that challenge? And it was a conversation that we've had, and I still don't know the answer to be honest. Because how do you? Because part of our event is a cocktail event.
Yeah.
We are very deliberate about having mocktail versions of everything. I think there should be mocktail versions in every restaurant. Why can't a sober person enjoy like a cultivated drink like you would enjoy a cultivated meal or an entree? Like, you should be able to enjoy a cultivated drink that just doesn't have vodka in it, as well, whether you're sober or not. But that's been an interesting thing to try to balance and communicate, because that seems to be the problem. People get very black and white, and sobriety often has to be black and white for people. But I think there's also so much room for conversation and for understanding how other people tick. And
Yeah.
I would love if like every every cocktail um, menu out there had non-alcoholic options for people, and that when you say, do you want a drink, it doesn't mean you want an alcoholic drink. I wish that was part of the conversation. And that's been interesting with my husband, and watching him in restaurants and stuff, just lack of options and celebratory things. So we're trying to balance that. What do you think about all that?
I think, as far as kind of going back to what you said with, having a few people on who do have a history with addiction, and not wanting to be so specific to any particular group. I think it just kind of lends itself to the fact that you never know who's struggling with what, right?
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, you have no idea, like kind of like what you're saying, as far as somebody could have it going on the outside, but on the inside be an absolute disaster, whether that's addiction, whether that's mental health, anxiety. I mean, all the things, right? You just don't know. And I think the more people that come on and share their true stories, the more people, regardless of how many people that you have that are speaking on one certain topic or not, can see there's just people out there that go through hard things.
Yeah.
And yet you can go through that hard thing and not allow it to wipe you out, but continue to rise above.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing, though, with people who drink versus people who don't, I always get like, if I'm with a group of people that I don't really know well, and they order something, they're like, do you care? I'm like, no, I don't care. Like, just because I'm abstaining has nothing to do with what you do. Like,
Right.
yes, so many people can drink and not have any consequences, right? Like, they can have a drink or two or whatever and be perfectly fine. That is like not in my wheelhouse at all. And I know that. So that's why I don't do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there's serious consequences. I wish there was a serious of consequences to other addictions, besides like, crippling debt and pants that don't fit. You know, they never put you in jail for splitting your pants
I've done it.
because of your COVID weight or whatever, you know. But if they did, I might think twice about that pizza. I don't know.
Well, I think we all have some vice,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
Like,
Well, what would life be without it?
I mean, I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't get drawn to sparkly pink things. Not at all. Oh, but I don't know. And I think it's good to talk about it. I just think it's good to be open about what's okay, what's appropriate, what's not, in digging through, when my husband was going through all that, like, what am I allowed to drink, and should I quit drinking? I really went through a lot of that. The most hilarious part of it is I discovered, that a lot of the drinking I did was because I didn't want to be sober dealing with him and his stuff. So now I don't really at all. I mean, truly, very rarely. So it's just funny how things changed for me when it changed in the house. And
Hmm.
what I thought would be impossible to navigate is fine. It's fine. So I don't know. I think it's only weird when people aren't sure. But I deal with it. It's not just an addiction thing. I deal with it with makeup, where people will say, because I'm a makeup artist, they'll say, "Oh gosh, don't look at my makeup," and I'm like, the last thing I care about is what your makeup looks like right now. Did I do it? Nope, I don't care. But people do. They're not really sure what they're supposed to do or say. So it's kind of
That's funny, Kendra.
all the time. All the time. And a lot of times they'll be like, "Oh, I thought you were gonna wear makeup," and I'm like, "I'm just tired of it." That's why I don't have hair either. I'm just done. So what do you want people to take away from your session at Vulnerably You?
I really want to, in sharing my story, it is to let them know that it's possible to maybe come to a place where you're at a bottom in your life and you can pull yourself out one step at a time, one moment at a time. And, I want to provide just a few ways that, they can own their story and discover their own path to purpose. I think sometimes we want to hide the things that have happened to us, or we feel like, it's a bad thing. And when we begin to heal those things and kind of move forward, um, all parts of our story can work together, and I think that it's really when people discover who they are by embracing every part,
Right.
because I know for me, when I tried to hide what was happening, it only created more chaos in my life and more of a disconnect, I believe, with my true self, and so in embracing that and owning that, um, it's allowed me to experience kind of a freedom that I never have. And so I really want to show women that it's possible to.
You said that people didn't know the problem that you had with alcohol, with drugs, and that people were like, did you almost have to talk people into believing you? Like, no, really, no, no, really, I have a problem, or was it? Did people take
I
it at
did
face
have
value?
some people, like some family members, that were like, really? Really? And even when I told my mom, like she knew when I went over to her house and I just was like, told her like, hey, I've decided to start going to 12-step meetings and like I'm done, and she was like, okay. And my dad had struggled with addiction, so it's not something that was foreign to my mom, but at different parts earlier in my journey, she was really worried about me. But like I said, I had a great job. I was, everything on the outside looked pretty good. And so for some people, yeah, it did, and it also involved kind of letting go of a lot of people that were in my life at the time as well, because I knew if I really wanted to move forward, that I couldn't still stay with the same people that were doing kind of the same things that I was doing too. So
Yeah, yeah, and you probably were really bonded to those people. I mean, if they're at the time anyway, if they're in your inner circle and they know all these dirty secrets about you, there's like a weird bond that happens with that, I think. At least maybe not as much.
well, I think yes and no. I think that it's almost like a false um you get
Oh,
to see who your
yeah, that's
your
fair.
real friends are. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because once you take away the drugs and the alcohol, who's still hanging around?
yeah,
Who
that's
actually
fair.
still wants to be around and hang out with you? And so I think for me, it just kind of opened my eyes to see, okay, who really is a friend and who was more of like, a person that I partied with.
Yeah, so like the bond was there, but it was a surface level and only was a bond because of this thing that bonded you together. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I remember one time an old friend of mine and I we kind of had this like tiff. You know, we're not friends any longer, but part of the reason we stuck around being friends with each other is because we had too much dirt on each other. Like if we weren't friends, then what? And you're like, geez, if I don't stay in that circle with her, she's gonna tell all my dirty secrets. But then it's almost like to who? To who does it matter when if you're making a big change in your life? And those, I mean, and it's I love the example of sobriety because I think a lot of us almost like what the girl that I interviewed yesterday, her story stems from losing her fiance at the age of 25 years old, getting ready to get married and move, dive into her life. And he died very unexpectedly. She said he went to work one day and he didn't come home. And, her life just completely changed from that. And it's like you can, whether you've been through something like that or not, whether you've been through a rock bottom with specifically with drugs or alcohol, or you've been through a profound death or loss like that, it your heart can imagine it. You can kind of like understand what that is and relate to somebody's story. And there is something in people's stories that make you go, okay, if she could make it through that, then whatever this is that I'm going through, I can make it through this too. And if sometimes I've said, well, gosh, why do I have to go through this to inspire somebody else? That sounds terrible. but but it's not really that way. It's more like looking back, gosh, if I can use this experience to help somebody suffer less or to help them feel less alone or to, let them know that, we can get through this problem together. It's not the end of the world. I mean, that's so valuable to people.
Absolutely. I think if anything, so with the pandemic, mental health has increased, addictions have skyrocketed, right? Because of that isolation. And I think when we can help people to see that they're not alone, that's really what helps people to move forward. because that fear can tell us all kinds of things, and keep us feeling stuck and like we're paralyzed almost or crippled, can't move forward. But when we can see that, we're not alone and there are people that care. And in fact, there's people who've maybe been in a similar situation and, look what they've got going on. Yeah, I think it definitely provides a sense of hope and gives you something else that like, okay, like I really can do this.
And as an adult, it's really hard to find friends that you can have these conversations with. I mean, we don't have the playground to say, hi, what's your name anymore. And then the pandemic happening really made an interesting fault on that. And we thank God for Zoom and all of these things where we can have conversations. But finding those spaces and knowing who's available to help provide those services is I don't know, that's not easy. So we're really grateful to have you at the conference to let people know, hey, here's an avenue for you if you're going through something tough. And I had no idea, by the way, this community that is really surrounded around the helping women stay sober, especially during a hard time in a pandemic. Man, y'all have shown up. I am always like, we go through our ticket sales and we can see which like coupon codes people use. And the coupon codes from our sober women are like, they get community. That community sticking together, supporting each other is very strong in that community. It's been very loud to us on our committee. Like, man, get out of the way because
That's exciting.
isn't that fun? And Angie, when I got to meet her, I was like, which by the way, she and I look like sisters. It's very weird. We took a selfie together and we both said, oh, we look alike. It was weird. And she posted it on social media too. And people said that on social media, like, wow, you guys look like you could be sisters. I'm like, I know, it's very weird. It wasn't just the, the short haircut, but yeah, it was, I mean, awesome meeting these people. There's such a vigor of life behind, just kind of in the spirit of somebody that's been through that sort of thing. And we're really excited to welcome that energy to the stage because we're going to need it with the masks and all of that.
Absolutely. I'm pumped. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. There'll be, I feel like it'll be like, when you plan for like a wedding or something, it's going to go so fast. and then we'll just be waiting for the next one all over again. Although my weary soul can't take that real quick. So we're just going to have to all breathe for a moment.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so grateful for the experience, but I cannot wait to plan. I do believe we'll have hybrid events forever.
Really?
Yeah, I do believe we'll have a virtual option. It's such a great option for a lot of people just don't have the time or the energy or the childcare or whatever. But I can't wait to have a hybrid event with no masks involved, no like COVID signage, no social distancing. I don't want to spend the money I've spent on hand sanitizer ever again. So,
Goodness.
all of that stuff. But I do think we'll continue the virtual option to give people an opportunity to experience that community at 10, at 6 feet, 10,000 feet, from afar if they want to, because there's been a lot of value in that for people. And
That's great. I did, you know what, now that you mentioned that, I did have a couple of people that reached out about the tickets and they were kind of saying that about, could I come to part of it or I can't come. And so, maybe for somebody like that, it's like the virtual would be such a great option.
yeah, and if they're not local or like I know some moms are getting together that don't have childcare and they are watching it together in the living room and helping each other with the kids. So they're doing like watch parties for people that can't come in person. And like how fun is that? So that's super exciting that people can kind of create their own experience. So if it wasn't for the pandemic, we wouldn't have even. I was very against anything virtual. People would say, "Oh, can you record it and we can watch the replays?" No, you can show up. How about that? Was my answer. But so hardcore. But then when we had to, I really saw the value in how we could reach people in a whole different way. And it's not easy to create an experience through the screen, but it can be done. And it takes, expensive software, but it can be done. So we're doing it.
Well,
Doing that
I
thing.
have to tell you something real quick
Okay.
because I'm just really proud of you.
Oh, well, thank you.
What you have created with you conferences, here you were with something that was a dream for you, right? And having to work through that fear of, okay, stepping into that, and is anybody going to show up? And I'm sure all the things that kind of ran through your mind to even get the wheels in motion. And now your dream has birthed so many other dreams, and you're allowing women to live out their dream of speaking and sharing their story. And I mean, it's just like this big huge ripple effect.
It's
And I think,
crazy.
like, I talk about this a little bit in my talk, but it's like, whenever we go to step through that fear, a lot of times we think about like what it's going to cost us, right? And we don't always imagine like that our light will lead somebody else out of darkness, and the impact that your choice of saying yes to this dream in your heart that felt really scary, how that has like opened up all these other doors for other women to kind of step out of their fear. So
Thank you. It is really, really amazing to watch it all happen, especially from my position. I see women meet each other for the first time at a conference and partner in like major life-changing business decisions later. I see people start at a conference with an idea or a business, and then I don't know if you follow Alex from the Agenda Period. She came to our conference as a health coach, and not with this thing launched at all. And then how our community has rallied around her to help, and not that we have made her successful by any stretch of the imagination, but like having that community around her as she's is putting together this, and now she's launching an app for period empowerment, which is like the weirdest two words I've ever put in a sentence. My sixth grader heart is breaking into a million pieces right now saying those words together. But but it's been so cool to watch, and that's just one example, that to watch people really kind of be able to own their own dreams. And then like you said, then watching Alex empower people, and watching what she's doing with her thing, and that empowering people, it really just goes blup 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 blup. And it's really amazing. It's I don't take all the credit by any means, but it is really cool to be a part of something that's really transforming people. It's neat.
absolutely. And I mean, you do have a pretty big team of women now who've hopped on board to support you and to support you conferences. And I just think it's really super cool. I
Yeah,
really,
yeah. And where we're going, like we have a few announcements, and then the dream just keeps getting really big. And it's never my intention to fill a stadium, but it is my intention to impact millions of people. And I have a plan to get there. And it's just like, would I've ever had that plan 3 years ago when I first started this? No, I was like, no, we'll just have these little events, and they'll have like 30 people, and they'll be cute and fine. And and now my joke now is that this hotel, like they're building an entire hotel for my event now. Like that's my story.
yes.
She opens next week, this poor woman. I've just reminded her we have a lot of grace, and we are we'll all jump in and get our hands dirty if we have to help out. So anyway, well, I want to thank you for being on with me today. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I'm excited to see where our paths continue to cross. It's been at least probably 5-6 years of our paths crossing, with in just life in general. So I'm excited to see where the next crisscross happens, because it's inevitable. So
Absolutely, it is. I'm thank you so much for having me on here, and just, I'm really excited to speak at you conference, and just, soak up all that good juju and all the good stuff. I'm really pumped.
take it into the summer with you, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for being on. I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop button now. And I